the Moneyweb Crypto Podcast, where we discuss all things crypto related. Your host, Kieran Ryan.
An underreported story in South Africa is the number of people who've started up small-scale Bitcoin mines. This is particularly attractive if you have unused solar power during the day. When the sun goes down, you can switch off the Bitcoin miners and turn them on again the next day. In fact, there's a strong case for commercial solar farms and for Eskom itself now that it has spare power to use this to mine Bitcoin. It's not exactly ideal for residential areas because these miners make a lot of noise and churn out excess heat. That'll be pretty useful in the winter, but not so much in the summer. But for the hundreds of commercial solar power farms out there, Bitcoin mining is probably something that they should be looking at. We're joined by Karel de Jager, who is Research Group Leader at the CSIR, and he's also Chief Executive Officer of Silver Sixpence, to look at the economics of setting up a Bitcoin mine, either at home or in the commercial sector. Hi, Karel. It's good to talk to you again. When we last spoke, you mentioned that you were doing some research work relating to commercial Bitcoin mining. Tell us how that's going.
Hi, Kieran. It's good to be back. Yeah, the last time we spoke, since the last time we spoke, there was actually a renewed commercial interest in an idea like this. As you know, this idea that I've had that Eskom must mine Bitcoin comes all the way back from 2018. And over the years, there's been little to no progress. I've mentioned it to Eskom a couple of times, but they weren't really interested. But there was quite a hard-hitting, influential team that was assembled, and this is led by Stafford Massey. And he's got some real prominent South Africans on board as well, whose names I will reserve for now. But there's also some new interest from big miners, even in the US. And then there's talks currently happening with Eskom. Now, as I've mentioned previously, Eskom and Bitcoin mining is like a match made in heaven. If you model the Bitcoin mining network as a customer of Eskom, so let's say you ignore all the other things, like self-sovereignty and Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, you just basically model it as a customer of Eskom, then they basically get the best client that they've ever had. So one that pays them up to 2 Rand a kilowatt hour with no contracts, no counterparty risks. You can switch them on and off when you want. They'll pay you immediately. So, they'll buy electricity from you in the morning, and in the evening, the money will be in your bank account. All of those wonderful things. So, yeah, finally, after all these years, it seems like there might be some light at the end of the tunnel.
Is this something that has happened just fairly recently? Because we mentioned this in one of the earlier podcasts we had when you were proposing that Eskom use surplus power, particularly during the day when there isn't much draw on the grid, to mine Bitcoin. Is that something that was prompted by that discussion, or has it been going on a bit longer than that?
I'm not exactly sure whether it was prompted or how much influence the discussion had. Probably it had some. But this is quite recently. So, as I've mentioned, there's a few prominent South Africans that's now finally getting on board. I think, they've all realized that South Africa is facing some unique challenges now. And this kind of gonna sound like a little bit strange, but South Africa is going to have a massive surplus of power in the next 5 years. Like, apart from Eskom getting their house in order and reducing load shedding, the demand's been reducing massively, at least the demand on the grid, because no one wants Eskom power anymore. Everyone's like making their own plan. But apart from that, there's a study being done by Eskom themselves that shows that there's about 70 gigawatts of power, of independent power producers coming online in the next 5 years. That is almost double what Eskom currently delivers. Actually, it's more than double what Eskom currently delivers. So, Eskom will be replaced twice in the next 5 years. And what are we going to do with all that power? Now suddenly the entire equation has shifted from the country being short on power and therefore strangling economic growth to one that has a massive surplus of power and has a shortage of actually clients that want that power. And, that's the absolute perfect setup for the Bitcoin protocol, the Bitcoin network. It wants power that's stranded. It is a client that can pay you a lot of money. It is location independent. So, I think that message is starting to really take hold inside influential corridors in the country. And I'm super glad about it.
And if Eskom does do this, would it be unique in the world as a major power producer, effectively a state monopoly? You would argue that it's not a state monopoly anymore because there's so much private power. Would it be unique in the world in mining Bitcoin?
No, it won't actually. So I think the largest precedent on this is the state of Texas. Although the grid looks a little bit different, so it's not really a monopoly on the grid. If you remember, Eskom does have a monopoly on the grid. They're the only ones that own the South African National Transmission Grid, whereas in Texas, that's not the case. So in Texas, we have the best case studies in all of the world. But then there's also a few, I'd say, smaller countries in the Middle East. There's a few smaller countries where the national operator would start mining Bitcoin. A couple of islands here and there as well. But I think by far, if you just go to Texas, you can basically get the perfect blueprint of what this can enable for a country like South Africa.
Well, let's talk about people on a fairly smaller scale. A lot of people have put in these solar rooftop systems, and you're in the process of setting up a small-scale Bitcoin mine at your house. And you probably started this off as a bit of a project, but maybe there's some good economics behind that. Maybe explain what those economics are. What does it cost to set up, and what do you expect to make from it in terms of revenue, Bitcoin revenue?
Yeah, that's actually quite an interesting one. So in preparation for this large-scale Bitcoin mine that would potentially come to South Africa, I've had to do some R&D work because there's a lot of unknown variables in this equation on setting up a commercial Bitcoin mine. And I've started to do some experiments regarding that. I bought a few miners and I've put them up here in my backyard. And because I needed to measure a few things. So first of all, there's a few things that you need to take into account. So first of all, these miners are incredibly noisy, and if they like louder than a drill. So you can imagine if you run them 24/7 inside your house, your neighbor. You can just imagine a drill, right? You hear it 2-3 houses down the road. So you cannot just run them in your garage. That's definitely going to cause a lot of turmoil in your neighborhood. So, I needed to figure out how to reduce the sound on them. I needed to figure out, how to control them. So how to control them very, very finely. I didn't want to switch off a miner or switch it back on. I wanted to control it very fine. And I do have some rooftop solar as well. So, during my experimentation in this R&D work that I'm doing is I'm measuring how much rooftop solar I have and how much excess power I have. Very typical to what I've just explained Eskom should do. And, if there's surplus power, I want to very finely control my plant, which consists then of these 3 miners. And then, I also wanted to see how possible it is to replace the firmware on these miners, for example, because then you can have full control over them. So it's the noise, it's the temperature, how hot they get, how much hashing power, and what's the economics behind that, as well as the heat. So the wonderful thing about a Bitcoin miner is that it uses a lot of electricity, right? And it prints Bitcoin on the other side. Basically, it turns any surplus in electricity into money in real time, right? That's essentially how it works. But it also produces a lot of heat. So the idea was, okay, so if I have this heat, what can I do with it? Can I do something? Can I meet some secondary need with this heat as well?
Okay, so talk about the noise first of all. How are you solving that, and how are you getting what are you doing with the surplus heat?
Yeah, so those two things that basically go together. So basically, I'm currently experimenting with immersion cooling. So basically that means that you buy oil that's specially formulated. So it's a type of synthetic oil that's specifically formulated for immersion chips, computer chips in them. So that's basically what a Bitcoin miner is. It's just a massive brick, quite heavy, full of computer chips. So you chuck the miners in there inside this immersion cooling system, and then you get rid of the heat of the noise entirely. So basically, you can't hear the thing at all because it's now submerged inside oil. Quite strange to see that the first time. And then, of course, the heat is also dissipated to the oil. So then you need to remove the heat from the oil. And now you need to build what is known as a heat exchanger. So basically, you pump the oil through a series of pipes, very much like your fridge works. At the back of your fridge, you have all these little copper pipes. And those copper pipes are really hot, and it dissipates heat to the atmosphere, and basically then it cools down, the stuff inside your fridge. But that heat that you feel at the back of your fridge is all the heat that is removed from the inside of your fridge, right? So that's how a fridge or a freezer works. Now, heat exchanger does basically the same thing. The only difference is I'm not removing heat from inside the fridge. I'm removing heat from the oil, and the oil is then getting heated up by these miners. Now, I also built this. As I mentioned, I want to do something with this heat. So what I'm currently busy doing is I'm connecting this heat exchanger to my swimming pool, and I'm actually heating my swimming pool. So the 3 miners that I have, they produce around 5 kilowatts of heat. Now that's a lot. That's like a full blown heater. Heater on its that you can buy from any general store on its maximum setting. That's about as much as you can get out of any plug point in your house. So 5 kilowatt is a hell of a lot of heat. So I'm taking all of that heat and putting it into my swimming pool, which heats the water by a few degrees Celsius. So that's all part of the equation. Now that's what I've mentioned. Now I'm using this power twice. So every kilowatt hour that my Bitcoin miner uses, first of all, it's printing me some Bitcoin, and secondly, I'm using it again, and this time to actually heat my pool. So it's serving a dual purpose, and this, of course, now using excess power from the roof. So it's not costing me anything in operational costs.
And are you using the grid at all, or do you switch off the miners when the sun goes down?
So I don't use the grid, not currently, because my residential power is quite expensive, where I stay in Pretoria. So I don't use the grid. And the fact of the matter is that if you don't use the grid and you only use solar power, only when it's available, the typical house there, then I think the economics of the entire situation comes a little bit borderline, because the miners are expensive. They're costing anything between $1,000 and $3,000, depending on where you buy. Can potentially get them a little bit cheaper if you buy secondhand, but that's quite a capital expenditure. That's a high capital expenditure to expend for buying a mine, and for the economics to really make sense on that. Let's say you want to pay back your miner within, let's say 2 or 3 years. Then you're gonna have to mine for more than just 6 hours a day, which is potentially what you'll get after you've used the power to heat up the microwave and and go through your daily routines. And then there's actual excess power, let's say between 10 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the evening. The mining window there is a little bit short. So you'd like to extend that a little bit, at least to 12 hours, then the economics starts to make sense. For me, I'm doing a lot of R&D work, and it's also, so I don't really mind, but it's also heavily dependent on the Bitcoin price. So if you're going to do that, if you're going to mine Bitcoin, let's say between 10 in the morning and 5 in the evening, right? Let's just take those 7-hour mining window as an example here. If you're going to do that, for the economics to make sense, you actually being able to pay off your miner in a reasonable time, you're going to have to go a little bit long on Bitcoin. You're going to have to wait maybe for Bitcoin to appreciate, let's say 10, 20, 30% before you sell it. And, then the CapEx efficiency makes sense. Then it's a really profitable operation that you're running.
So if you're trying to get more hours of mining than the sun is providing, would you not have to draw on the grid at some point?
Yes, then you're going to have to. But the thing is, your grid electricity, you probably need that at least, let's say, it's cheaper than R2 a kilowatt hour. If you're going to pay more than R2 a kilowatt hour, you're going to mine at a loss. Now, you can still mine. I mean, there's still benefits to mining, but for you as a residential owner, that's more or less where the cutoff points are now. That's also very, very variable dependent, and it can change tomorrow because it's dependent on the total amount of hash power, so the total amount of people mining around the world. It's dependent on the Bitcoin price, the difficulty, and a lot of those things which are not that predictable in the future. I mean, myself, I'd like to predict that, yes, Bitcoin's going to $1 million, I do believe that. over the long term. But it means that you're going to be able to, mine and hold that Bitcoin and fund your electricity. In the meantime, pay for your electricity because you are quite explicitly long Bitcoin. Like you're going to have to wait for the Bitcoin to appreciate before you can make substantial revenue. So yeah, you can definitely subsidize that with the grid, but it's much better if you have, like, for instance, industrial power or so. So I would say the best way to go about it is, first of all, to double use your power. So, heat your swimming pool, do something with the heat at least. Then you can maybe switch off your heat pump that you've used in your swimming pool. That's the first thing, is double use your kilowatt hours. And then secondly is try to be as capex efficient as possible. What I mean by that is, like, try to source a cheap miner, like second hand or something like that. Then the economics becomes immediately obvious. If you only mine 7 hours a day, it's no problem because you got your miners at a good price.
And the research that you're doing, are you making this available open source to the public, or is this proprietary to the CSIR? Or what do you intend to do with it?
So currently, this research that I'm accumulating is the property of this new venture, that I've mentioned, which is this commercial Bitcoin mining farm that will hopefully be launched. I'm not exactly sure, but there might be a case to make a lot of this open source. There are actually also good models. This one acquaintance that I've met through in the last few weeks during my research is from engineeringfluids.com, which provides, like, the immersion fluid to do this, the oil that you actually do that. They have some fantastic open source models as well, which are available, for calculations and those kind of things. We've built a lot of it ourselves as well. But yeah, I mean, if there's any interest in someone that wants to know more than willing to contact me, and I can definitely share on a case to case basis with people. I don't mind.
Terrific. Okay. Well, let's change the topic here briefly. When we last spoke, you told us about ExoChain, which is your blockchain tool for tracking down funds that have been lost or scammed. And I believe you recently managed to recover funds for somebody by tracking it down on the blockchain and just monitoring the movement of these funds. Tell us about that and how you actually did that.
Yeah, so in this case, you're right. So in this case, we were lucky to be able to identify the funds within minutes or even hours or even minutes after it's been stolen, and that is key to the success of potential recovery of the funds. So if you can identify it, and I want to urge the general public, if you ever lose crypto, like through a scam or theft or whatever the crime may be, then please do get a case number from the police as soon as you possibly can. That is quite critical, right? So every minute counts, because the thieves or the criminals will obviously try to exchange that crypto for fiat money in some way or another. And if you are too late to have their accounts frozen, then the chances of recovery are obviously extremely low. So, get a case number, and in this case, we were able to do that very quickly, and we were able to identify the flow of funds to certain custodians or exchanges, and then with that case number, we were able to order them to freeze the accounts. And they froze the accounts pending litigation, of course, and then there was a process that followed. In this case, it wasn't really formal litigation that went through the High Court, but there was discussions happening between the exchange and the South African police force, which in the end resulted in the exchange recovering those funds or refunding those funds to the victim. Now, as you can imagine, an exchange cannot just act on any information, right, on a contact form to refund stolen funds to a victim. So there's a process that needs to follow for the exchange to also be convinced that there was a real crime happening, and that those funds that the victim claims are actually theirs. And that's the part that successfully played out. That's the part that we always struggle with, to be honest. Because usually it has to go like to the High Court or to the Financial Intelligence Center or some similar authority. But in this case, we did manage to get it only with the South African Police Force Corporation.
Just explain, how were the funds stolen? What was the mechanism used?
So, like, I'll be a little bit general in this case, because it does happen a lot, and there's a lot of cases that end up in our inbox, because of the exposure that we get and the type of work that we do. So basically, in this case, it was also one of these in which someone lands on a website, for example. He has self-custodial Bitcoin or self-custodial crypto inside a wallet, which means that it's not with an exchange like Luna or Valor or one of those, right? So he keeps the keys himself. And he lands on one of these websites which claim to do one thing, but then actually does another thing. And then, he clicks around on the website, wants to claim an airdrop, for example, or, wants to sign a message. In many cases, like, you'd go into the website, and for those of us that's familiar with cryptocurrency, you can use your wallet as a means to log into a website, right? So basically what that entails is it signs a message saying, hey, I'm, Karel de Jager, and I want to go into this website. It's an alternative way of logging in to a website, for example, or authenticating. So, and they'll make you think that that's what they're doing. But in the meantime, they're signing a transaction that drains the funds out of your wallet. So that's kind of stuff that happened in this case as well. And it's really, really tough to navigate it. Like, even for a crypto expert, like, if you're using like non-custodial technology, wallets in which you handle your own private keys and so on, like the level of sophistication of these criminals are extremely high. And they will really, like, the type of phishing attacks that they do is they will really make you believe that they're doing one thing. And if you don't spend like an extraordinary amount of attention on like what you're actually doing with your wallet, then you're going to lose money. Like, for instance, myself, I don't even trust myself, because I know that I'm not the guy that reads every single letter in a contract. Like, I'm the guy that scans over something and just proceed, because I need to get stuff done, right? And I'm always in a hurry. So, like, if you are like that, then I would highly advise you not to engage in these kind of things. It's because you're the kind of guy that they're looking for in that case.
So I guess the advice to people is don't log onto websites using your wallet as an alternative means. Do it the traditional way.
I'd say yes, do that. That's at least, like, and also, like, spread your risk. Don't keep your big funds, inside a MetaMask wallet that's connected to the internet, for example, and that you use a lot. Like, keep that somewhere else. Like, separate your assets. That's another trick. And then, but finally, in some cases, you just can't get away from it. If you want to, for example, claim an airdrop, you don't want to use just a small amount of your crypto stash to claim an airdrop, for example. You want to claim an airdrop with everything you have, because obviously, you get an airdrop amount as per the amount in your wallet, for example. And in those cases, yeah, I mean, maybe like take a test run, just do a small amount and then do another transaction. Yeah, that's actually also a good tip. So whenever you need to pay someone else, I do a lot of crypto payments, for example, where I need to, pay people and so on. And in most cases, I do a test transaction first. So do a little small $1, $5 transaction, whatever the case may be, and then transfer the large amount. That's also usually a really good thing to do, a good habit.
Are the scammers becoming more cunning? It sounds like they are, and they're becoming more sophisticated. Give us a sense of some of the new scams involving crypto that you're coming across.
Yeah, so, like I said, these phishing attacks are rampant, and they're extremely sophisticated, and it's really tough to see past them, even as a sophisticated crypto or experienced crypto user. So those are really prominent, I'd say. Email addresses that's being leaked through whatever means, and phishing emails as well. Those kind of things are very prominent. And then the typical crypto scam looks very much like typical forex scam. It's like in a lot of cases there's some business that's built on top of it, some front that makes it that obfuscates the actual scam at the back, a pyramid scheme, some network marketing, whatever the case may be. We see these things quite a lot. I also have to say that there's also an increasing amount of like organized crime using crypto. But there's a good side of that as well, and that is that the authorities in South Africa are really, waking up to that and realizing that this is a problem and starting to take action, against these kind of things. And the wonderful thing about the blockchain, for example, is that your data never gets deleted. So, I've experienced some of the authorities going back like 5-10 years even in South Africa, and starting to investigate and prosecute cases where transactions have happened a very long time ago. Now, if those transactions happen through a bank, then there's a big possibility that the necessary paperwork and audit trails would have been destroyed in the meantime. So, even though you might get away with an illicit transaction, with crime, today, if you do it today, because the authorities might need to catch up a little bit, there's no guarantee, that you get away with the same crime a decade or 2 or 3 from now, because I can guarantee you that, that data will be analyzed in future and that action will be taken. So yeah, that's, I think, a nice testament to the immutability of blockchain technology.
Yeah, I think in terms of the Financial Advisory and Intermediary Services Act, the banks are only required to keep records for 5 years. Whether they do longer or not, I guess, is up to them. But that's the law. So after that period of time, there's no audit trail. Whereas with the blockchain, it's forever. Just final question. We did discuss the last time we had you on. You came up with a comment which I think a lot of people were pretty surprised at, and you weren't that enthusiastic about self-custody of your crypto. You felt maybe the best way to go, leave your crypto on the exchange, because most of them have got very, very secure security protocols in place. Do you still believe this?
Yes, I do, and the reason for that is because of all the damage I've seen in people trying to handle and manage their own keys. So I myself do regard myself as a cryptocurrency expert, and I've set up like a multi-signature scheme, for example, to store some Bitcoin and so on, and it's really, really tough. Like, if someone else is going to do that, if someone else is going to try and set up a multi-signature scheme, there's a big chance that they'll get that wrong. And also, if you get advice from the wrong people, then of course they're gonna take your crypto. So you can't really take any advice from anyone on the street. Of course, there are reputable firms in South Africa as well that could help you with those kind of things. But in general, you shouldn't really take advice. Now, a lot of people just try to do it, and it works for them initially, and then over time they take a misstep. And I've seen even some close friends that happened to them, and acquaintances. I've seen there's many people in my inbox that have lost their life savings, and those things make me incredibly sad. And that's actually made me make a 180-degree turn on my opinion about self-custody. In the past, I've thought to myself, yes, self-sovereignty is amazing, and I still do preach that. Self-sovereignty that crypto and Bitcoin enables is just astonishing, and that everyone should be able to have control of their full assets outside of authoritative control and authoritarian measures and all those kind of things. I'm definitely for that. I'm a sovereign individual. That's my favorite book, and taught me a lot of life lessons. But I think in general there's another side of it as well. And that's the side that I've experienced lately, in which people try to do that, but then they lose their life savings, everything that they've ever worked with. And that part of it is incredibly sad to see. So I think there's maybe some sort of a balance to be found in between these two extremes. But I don't think that self-custody is the only answer. There's something else to consider as well. And that is that the user experience of crypto and custody solutions especially is just so bad at this point that you cannot just preach to everyone that they should do self-custody, even though the ideals of self-custody is absolutely amazing. It's just the reality that they're going to get it wrong, at some point, and they're going to lose their money. They're not going to do proper inheritance planning, for example, and those kind of things. And yeah, I think that the conversation is a lot more nuanced than many crypto enthusiasts believe.
Well, we're going to leave it there. What a fascinating discussion. We covered a lot of ground there, from Bitcoin mining, Eskom contemplating Bitcoin mining, as well as doing your own small-scale Bitcoin mines at home, as well as ExoChain and tracking down stolen funds and self-custody. So I want to thank you very much once again, Karel de Jager, who is Research Group Leader at the CSIR, and he's CEO of Silver Sixpence.
Thank you very much, Kieran.
Thanks for listening to the Moneyweb Crypto Podcast, hosted by Kieran Ryan. To listen to our other podcasts, go to moneyweb.co.za or the Moneyweb app and follow Moneyweb News for daily updates.